hourly mandated increase. We'll talk it out on Air Talk in just 20 minutes, right here on 89.3 KPECC and the KPECC app.
You're listening to The Takeaway. I'm Tanzina Vega, and we're talking about the latest news out of Russia, where opposition leader Alexei Navalny was sentenced to more than 2.5 years in prison. Still with me is Masha Gessen, staff writer at The New Yorker. Masha, President Biden got on a call with Vladimir Putin and told him that he had concerns over Navalny's imprisonment, and yet they imprisoned him anyway. What does that tell us already about the tone of the relationship between Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin?
Well, this doesn't really tell us anything new. Remarkably, in the Kremlin readout of the call, there was no mention of Navalny. But, the Putin administration has been impervious to international pressure since the beginning. The Biden administration is different from other U.S. administrations in that this is the first administration since the Cold War that has not come in promising the American people that it will improve relations with Russia, which I think is a great sign. It's a great sign of realism, and I hope it's also a sign that, it's a great sign of realism just because it's impossible at this point to improve Russian-American relations. But I also think it's a sign that this administration understands it's morally wrong to strive to improve relations with a dictatorship.
Now, is that, Masha, because of 4 years of the Trump presidency and what that did to U.S.-Russia relations, which I think we should talk a little bit about? Is the Biden administration sort of responding to that as well?
I'm not sure. Probably it made it easier for the Biden administration to not focus on improving relations with Russia because Trump so discredited the very idea of improving relations with Russia. I mean, despite all of Trump's rhetoric, the Russian-American relations actually continued their long-time nosedive during the Trump administration, right? There was no improvement. But the Trump administration certainly did not put any pressure on Russia or on any other international human rights violator to stop violating human rights. The Biden administration, in this sense, is returning to the traditional American policy of at least reminding these dictatorships that they're violating their obligations.
Does Vladimir Putin have a long-term plan for dealing with Alexei Navalny and his followers at this point? Or is this the wait and see, we'll put him in jail and then we'll decide what to do after that?
I don't think Vladimir Putin has a long-term plan about anything ever. I used to think, by watching him and sort of calculating the amount of time that it took him to think about something, that he had a planning horizon of 6 weeks.
Hi, what can I get for you?
Hey, can I get 2 Egg McMuffins, and then can I get an iced coffee with milk, no sugar?
To Russia, even though he had said to
What
the media,
size?
Large.
In an interview with me, for example, that he was definitely going to return to Russia when he was done.
That'll do it for me.
Poisoning.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
Scrambled to try to scare him away when he actually announced that he was coming back. It was all cooked up in the course of days. They diverted his plane to a different airport to avoid protesters on 8 minutes' notice. They took him to a police precinct and had a fake trial inside a police precinct to be able to keep him under arrest. This is kind of seat of your pants way of dealing with Navalny. And as for protesters, they're responding with a large-scale crackdown. They're arresting thousands of people. They don't even have anywhere to put the people that they have arrested. So one of the most horrifying details of the last few days is that hundreds of people who were arrested over the weekend in St. Petersburg and Moscow, overall there were arrests in 90 different cities, but in those big cities where arrests numbered in the many hundreds, 40 hours after they were first detained, they were still in unheated police vans, parked outside of detention centers, waiting in line to be admitted. People had not received any food. They were not allowed to leave the van to go to the bathroom.
I also have this coupon. I don't know if I can give that to you. Thank you.
Just how little planning, logic, strategy, anything is in the past.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. T
been afraid of protesters. Dislodged by protest, but now he has been watching Alexander Lukashenko in Belarus, who basically does not care that his entire country has been marching in protest for 5 months. People have been arrested, people have been tortured. In Belarus, several thousand people, it's now been documented, have been subjected to torture, and yet people keep coming out to protest.
Thank you.
And nothing happens. Lukashenko's just, he has no legitimacy, but he just refuses to leave office. And that has to have been a kind of inspiring example to Putin, who realizes he doesn't have to react to these protests with anything other than brute force.
Masha, in terms of the U.S.-Russia relationship going forward, that Navalny is just one piece of this. As we look at, for example, the first year, potentially, under the first 100 days, even, under the Biden administration, what are some of the priorities that you see for our Russian envoys and our strategy with Russia right now?
Relations with Russia are clearly not a priority for the Biden administration, which I think is understandable because this is an area in which progress is all but impossible. There's an arms treaty that was signed. I think this was the only sort of positive item on the Russia agenda. And other than that, the Biden administration really has to consider what it's going to do about Navalny, about Russian interference in American politics. So there are a number of sanctions questions on under consideration. There are also sanctions that basically have to kick in almost automatically because of the use of chemical weapons. And so the real question is the Biden administration going to sort of choose harsher measures or milder ones? The logic of using milder measures is it hopes that it can somehow influence Putin's behavior, Putin's policies. I don't think it has any illusions about that. So I'm kind of hoping that they're looking at harsher sanctions because at least they're the right thing to do. We can't influence Putin, but we can take a moral stand.
Masha Gessen is a Russian-American journalist and staff writer at The New Yorker. Masha, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Supported by Constant Contact, with email marketing, websites, online stores, and other resources. Committed to helping small businesses and nonprofits stay connected and do more business online. Learn more at ConstantContact.com.
Hi, this is Larry Mantle. Next time on Air Talk, the LA Times' Pat Morrison joins me. We'll talk with listeners about why they become attached to their area codes. Not only that, some people go to great lengths to obtain a particular area code. What's the reason for this? It's Air Talk, weekdays at 10, here on 89.3 KPCC, the KPCC app, and streaming always at kpcc.org.
KPCC supporters include Disney and Pixar presenting Onward. Directed by Dan Scanlon, original song Carried Me With You performed by Brandi Carlile. Academy eligible in all categories, now streaming on Disney+.
This is The Takeaway with Tanzina Vega from WNYC and PRX in collaboration with WGBH Radio in Boston.
Last week on the show, we discussed the tweet I sent out about, quote, the pandemic wall I was hitting from the burnout of parenting during the pandemic, without proper childcare, constant workflow, nonstop news, and social isolation. And the response to that tweet was overwhelming. So far from the only one suffering right now, thousands of you say you've also hit that wall. And while it seems counterintuitive to do less right now, my next guest says there's lots of power in resting. Catherine May is a writer and author of Wintering, The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times. Catherine, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Catherine, we're